we'll look at it at the end. So, well, it's me. I haven't done anything nearly that interesting. I've tried to teach Martí for many years. I am able to naturally get deeper into him in the times that I've taught him in Cuba, which is always very interesting. When I take students to Cuba, I always insist that I'm the one who covers Martí, and I let the Cuban professors cover other aspects of him, and I like to have them look at him in a more sort of controversial light, to try and break down the myth. Here in the here the last time I taught Martí was last semester, and I was teaching a course on Latin American cultural history. And what I really wanted to do was to make Martí relevant to the present moment and to the present political moment in the United States. So I did develop what I think was an interesting activity that gave a lot of that produced a lot of interesting discussion over a couple of class periods, and that was taking the canonical text Nuestra America, which is always, first of all, it's a hard read. It's a challenging read for students in Spanish who are still learning Spanish. But there's this notion, this sort of patriotic notion, this Nuestra America, as our America, as being this sort of exaltation, when in reality, no, Nuestra America is a very harsh critique of Latin America itself, right? And so I wanted to look at it in two ways. So I taught that text after we had covered the 19th century in Latin America, and looked at that text as an analysis of why the independence of Latin America in many ways had been a failure. What were the causes of that sort of incomplete independence movement at the beginning? But then I wanted to see what they thought about Nuestra America as an analysis of our current political moment. And the way that I did that that essay, we all know, begins with Martí talking about the small town mayor who thinks he's, king of the world because he controls a little town, but he doesn't realize that there's a giant behind him who's going to squash him like a bug. And then what he points out, which I think is an element of that text that is often overlooked, is that his critique is for the intellectual class of Latin America, and he argues that the reason that tyranny has succeeded in Latin America is because the people who have the intelligence and the preparation to govern are disconnected from the elements of that country, right? That they only talk among themselves and they don't know what's really going on in the nation, and so they leave an opening. And he says something that maybe can be interpreted in a sort of classist way. Again, I try to keep my own opinions out of it, but that he says, that the common man in his lingo, the common man wants to be governed well and wants to be left alone. Doesn't want to think about governance, just wants to be able to go to work and make a living and what have you. And if he feels that he's being looked down upon or ignored by the governing class, tends to find his revenge in the demagogue who speaks in the language of the lower classes, and that becomes the instrument by which the uneducated classes get vengeance on the upper classes. So it led to a really interesting debate in the class, if that is an adequate description or not of the Trump presidency, and if this wasn't a very similar sort of process that Martí was analyzing in the context of Latin America, and that's something that just that one question turned out to be a very, very productive. We didn't have to look at any other texts, as both it was sort of a hinge between looking at 19th century Latin America, but also making it a very relevant political debate. The other thing that I love to do with Martí is he's such an iconic image, just like Jenny was showing all of those images of Martí. I've collected images of Martí for a long time, and I use some of Solom's too. And I'd love to analyze the sort of history of how historical characters are represented. And I was able to end that lesson with, and I'm going to share it with you, and then we'll move on to the next person. The newest image that I have acquired of Martí. Just a second. So in Cuba last year, I bought this work of art from a Cuban photographer, and I think it's an amazing image to analyze Martí in Cuba now. So it's just one of the sort of ubiquitous busts of Martí, but smashed, or the front of it is smashed. And I don't know if some of you have followed, but in Cuba there was this defacement of the Martí statues, people putting pig's blood on the statues and what have you. And so, how does that provoke these sort of debates? So that was the one idea that I wanted to share as something that you might find useful in some of your classes.